Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
Get your fat husband off the couch. Get that fat pig off the couch. Tell him to go and vote for Trump. He's going to save our country. Get that guy the hell off her. Get him up, Jill. Slap him around. Get him up. Get him up, Jill. We want him off the couch to get out and vote.
Quiet Riot. Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the weekend chopped liver to your weekday brisket. I'm Naomi Smith.
And I'm Alex Andreou. Thank you for joining us on another Sunday School. Thank you for sharing your headspace with us. These are becoming quite lovely get-togethers, I feel. And can I encourage you once more today, when you have a little bit more free time and you're at your home computer, to take this opportunity to back us, if you can, with a few quid or a regular monthly donation on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. As you know, we put all of our content out to everyone for free, and so we depend on people who are generous enough and can afford it to back us so we can make more content for you.
Listeners, I've got my miniature golden doodle with me today. Wrigley.
Yes, very special guest, Wrigley.
Very special guest. So if you hear a little bit of growling or a little bark, forgive me. He's just letting us all know that he's here, and he may or may not agree with what we're talking about.
Now, what are we talking about today, Naomi? And we should say that the topics today came from our Discord channel. If you are a Ko-Fi supporter and you haven't joined our Discord channel yet, we're going to put up another link on our Ko-Fi posts feed and probably send you another email at some point next week too.
Well, yeah, Alex, what we've done this week for the first time, now we've got, I think a few hundred people on our Discord channel that are our backers from Ko-Fi. We asked them what they'd like us to be talking about this weekend. And we had lots and lots of suggestions and more that came through on email and social media too. And we've boiled it down to a discussion about budget speculation. And that's come from listener Kit of Nowhere. We're going to be giving our latest thoughts about the bloody Tory leadership race. And that's come from listener Lakitu. And then we're also going to cover US elections. Lots of people asking for that, but particularly Spiny Bear, Nick, and Radio Forever. Quiet Riot. So onwards to budget speculation, which, as we record this on a Saturday, by the way, so that we can have a little iron on a Sunday morning while you all get to listen to this show. The Saturday front pages are just littered with budget speculation. And Alex, I know you've got some quite firm views on that, but also you've got some pretty decent experience of how the pre-budget period works from your time as a civil servant. Why don't you talk us through how you think, this whole period plays out between departments and HMT and then finally making its way into the budget?
Look, speculation as to what's in a budget before a budget is not unusual. It happens every time, with lots of journalists asking basically ministers and proxies, responding, we can't confirm nor deny any of this. So what happens is this: the Treasury sends out various briefs to various departments and they say, can you model me what a 5% cut would look like? Can you model me what you would use 5% extra for? Can you model me what a change of policy in this area would cost? Can you model me what a change in that policy area would save? And departments come back to the Treasury with their various responses, okay? Now, what happens is that a lot of that stuff leaks out to the press, and the worst case scenario is always chosen because it's the most click-worthy and sensationalist. So if I ask the Department of, let's say, Work and Pensions to model me a sort of 5% to 15% saving, then all the papers, when that leaks out, will plump for the 15% saving
Because
and present
it's
it,
the bigger,
present it as Labour are planning to clobber the Department of Work and Pensions with a 15% cut. That's what happens. I mean, I was listening to Sky News on Saturday. Rob Powell came on and said something along the lines of, today's attack from the Conservatives claims that thresholds will stay where they are. So they've moved on from the employer national insurance contributions bit, and now they're saying that they won't change the rate, but they'll keep the thresholds frozen, which incidentally the Conservatives have done for the last several years.
Well, of course.
It's how we all came to know so much about fiscal drag. And so there is a sort of acknowledgement that all these things are largely fishing expeditions put out by journalists or the Tories setting out their stall on why any possible measure is terrible because whatever. And media is reporting it all as if it's about to happen.
And media from the left and the right, I've noticed.
Yes, I think this is what makes it very different this time, okay? In the past, you had, let's say, the Daily Mail getting exercised if anything leaked out, let's say in particular about pensioners, and setting out their stall preemptively. What you now have is that media from both the right and the left, they're kind of choosing the gossip that best suits their negative view of the government and running with it. So while all the right-leaning papers today were full of basically claims that it's going to be a massive tax raid, the left-leaning papers were convinced, austerity 2.0, they're going to punish disabled people, force people with mental health issues back to work and all that stuff. And what worries me is that these narratives are becoming so entrenched, especially on social media, and the atmosphere is so toxic that the budget will come out and everyone will just ignore it. They'll just scan for the bit that allows them to say, told you this was what they were, told you they were evil. And, you know, I see so many people who normally treat these reports with a lot of skepticism, just reacting to them as if they are already fact. And I just don't get it. You know, my view is there will be good stuff in there and bad stuff in there. We know from the financial situation in which the government finds itself, it will be mainly bad stuff in there. But let's wait to see what is actually in there, how they seek to balance it out, and then we can comment on it, criticize it.
But can we also just take a moment to talk about how bad the inheritance is? I mean, George Osborne back in 2010 brandished the economy that he'd inherited because of the financial crisis as, quote, the worst economic inheritance in modern history. But when we look at where the UK is now, I mean, it is unquestionably a worse inheritance that 14 years of Conservative government has left Rachel Reeves. You know, you've got 4 million people living in a state of destitution. We've got over 3 million people using food banks. And can I just give you the number for 2010? It was 41,000. You genuinely got malnutrition as an issue for lots of British children. We've got national debt reaching 100% of GDP for the first time since the 1960s, I think. And economic growth pitiful that we've talked about so many times. So without question, she is inheriting something far worse than any Tory chancellor in modern political history has inherited. So of course there are going to be some tough things. And I just kind of get disappointed that the left aren't framing it more in those terms than, as you say, just jumping on but we're going to have even more cuts to public services. The Guardian did do a relatively good thing, though. They found some big business owner, millionaire type people who were saying that they were supportive of tax rises. So you had Mark Campbell, who founded Higgity Pies. I don't know if you've ever had one of them. They're delicious. He called for tax rises on business and said the UK needs a fairer tax system to invest in its future. Graham Hobson, who's a millionaire founder of Photobox, said entrepreneurs are driven by passion and problem solving and creating value, not by low taxes. So I think that's good. And there has been some trickle of decent news in the run up to the weekend from government. And that's the rumours that HS2 will now go to Euston and to Crewe. And if that's true, I think that is excellent, excellent news, because when you cancel major infrastructure projects like HS2, as the last government tried its damnedest to do, and cancelled very significant chunks of it, it just sends the wrong message to the world. Like, even Britain won't invest in its own future, so why should anyone else bother to? So I think with the investment summit last week that we talked about on the main show, and if we see anything in the budget around big infrastructure stuff, which we're inevitably going to do given their ambitions on house building, I think investment will start to flow back in again, and bringing public services on which businesses, as well as, of course, voters rely on, isn't a drag on the economy, but gives it the shot in the arm it so sorely needs. And on that point, if anyone hasn't managed to go and listen to the episode that I recorded with Gareth Dennis, the railway engineer, we really get into all of that stuff, and he is absolutely superb at explaining why we all win if we fix the railways.
And there was also Steve Rigby on BBC Question Time this week, the owner of the Rigby Group, or he rather runs the Rigby Group. And again, he was making similar points.
And what about national insurance contributions for employers as opposed to just for employees?
I'm talking for someone that's got 4,500 of our 9,000 people here in the UK, so it's a big consideration for us. There have been two previous changes. So 2003 and 2011 were changes previously, 1% each change. Business absorbed. And I do feel sorry for the small businesses out there. And if you take the private sector workforce, it's about 23 million people. About 15 million work for medium or bigger sized businesses. But the smaller businesses are impacted disproportionately. But if you're a fair-sized business, 50 employees or more, you probably can absorb 1%. Okay. And if that's what we have to do for the country, I think it's the right thing to do.
I found your interview with Gareth Dennis on rail actually really rather profound and with applicability across a lot of other areas.
Yeah.
Because it sort of echoed things that I have heard when investigating many other failures of state. PPE, the Horizon scandal, is definitely among those. In many, many areas, you hear the same thing, that government, in its rush to farm out everything to private contractors, has not kept sufficient in-house expertise to basically plan what it wants.
Bring back the Department of National Works, Alex. Let's start with the position.
Plan what it wants, put out a bid that makes sense, assess what comes in, and then quality check the outcome. And you get this again and again. They basically have to, when Fujitsu comes in and says, no, the system is working brilliantly, they basically just have to take the contractor's word for it. And this is, I think, something that will not cost a massive amount of money to address, is simply a shift in focus, and Labour could do.
Yeah.
Quiet. Riot.
We both really enjoyed a Bloomberg article by Chaminda Jayanetti. Do you want to tell listeners about it? We'll pop a link to the show notes, in the show notes to the piece. But
I'll pop a link in the show notes. The TLDR version of it is something that to be honest, I've been griping about for a long time.
And then along comes somebody as eloquent as Chaminda that writes it up beautifully, and you're like, bugger, why didn't I?
Very annoying.
Why didn't I write that?
Why didn't I pitch it? Basically, the banking crisis, 2008-2009, was a crisis of capitalism. We ended up with the state having to prop up private businesses that, under free market dogma, should have been allowed to fail, but couldn't be allowed to fail. And so what happened was a mutualization of loss while profit still remained private.
We nationalised the losses and privatised the profit.
Yeah. And then Conservatives came in and pretended that the problem was too many nurses and too many teachers, because that's what suits their philosophy. So Chaminda Jayanetti writes, the Tories misdiagnosed Britain with mythical diseases and administered treatments that acted as toxins, like chemotherapy without the cancer. And I think there is something really very serious to that. They got stuck in this rhetoric of public services bad, civil servants lazy and useless, austerity is what's needed, and then more austerity, and then more austerity, froze wages across the public sector, which have resulted in an unprecedented recruitment and retention crisis everywhere you look in public services. And the result is basically what we're getting now. These chickens have come home to roost.
Yeah.
And that leads us actually rather beautifully in our second topic, which is the Tory leadership election, because essentially Chaminda's thesis is that instead of concentrating on that, instead of saying, what are the new conservative values? What are the new conservative economic policies that take into account that we are now in a very different world, with climate crisis, with banking having failed, with furlough having been implemented during a pandemic? And instead they're concentrating really on two contenders' personalities.
And doubling down on the issues around immigration.
And, civil servants, bad. I mean, Kemi Badenoch wants to put 5% of them in jail. I still don't know why exactly.
Oh, goodness me. You watched the debate, bless you. Thank you for doing that so that, others don't have to.
Well, you say debate. It wasn't actually a debate.
Right, yes, of course.
And this was
one goes first, the other goes second.
One went first, answering questions from an entirely right-leaning audience.
I mean, and Jedrick won the toss, didn't he? So he went first, but you never go first because then you can't respond.
No, I don't know what he was thinking. Did he think this was a test match? And no resistance or fact-checking was offered from the political editor of GB News, erstwhile of Telegraph, Christopher Hope, presented zero resistance to whatever nonsense they were saying. So it wasn't really a debate, and it didn't really result in any decent policy lines that we didn't know were there. It was interesting, I guess, on the ECHR, which is their main big point of difference.
I mean, and it's not main. So the popcons, the popular Conservatives, are now backing Jedrick, ostensibly because of his no, absolutely, we should leave the CHR position. And of course, absolutely nothing to do with the fact that he said that he'll put Jacob Rees-Mogg into the party chairman role, of course. But Badenoch is only taking a vaguely more nuanced position, which is, well, look, we should probably have a discussion about it. I'm not going to commit to it now.
She went a little bit stronger than that. The quote I jotted down in my notes is, we need to stop blaming the EU or international agreements and start fixing problems here ourselves.
We have to ask ourselves, why is it that countries that are in the ECHR are able to deport people who are there illegally better than us? France is able to send back about 70%, where we send back about 10%. So it cannot be the ECHR that is stopping us from doing that. Leaving the ECHR is not dissimilar to leaving the EU in terms of the consequences. Last time, everybody forgot about Northern Ireland, and then we started playing catch-up. We cannot make that mistake again.
And so I think she went a little bit stronger than you suggest, to give her due. And actually, for someone like me who's thinking who's the least insane one.
Oh yes, like a Tory member like you, yes.
That actually is a significant point of difference, because I really do not want the country to be plunged into another Leave Remain debate. Yeah.
Well, there are now not going to be any more debates, are there? I mean, she won the audience vote hands down pretty much. So the cancelling of any future things, do we think that's her wanting to consolidate the lead she feels she's got and doesn't want to risk upsetting it with a future performance that's not as strong?
Look, Chris Mason of the BBC, and the BBC was going to be one of the holders of those debates, so I have no reason to doubt their information, says that they've been cancelled largely because of Kemi Badenoch's objections, although they are having an issue with CCHQ as well. And I find this really quite astonishing.
Go for it.
It's extraordinary that it's had no further pickup. So the BBC wrote to the two candidates in the Conservative Party saying they would put together an audience, half of which would be recent Conservative voters, balance them between Jedrick and Badenoch in terms of preference, and then the other half would be a variety of political sentiments, but all of whom will have voted Conservative at some point in the past, basically. And the Conservative Party headquarters wrote back to say that any official event must have a studio audience made up of people who are Conservative Party members.
Ooh. Yeah, not those that they might want to win back at the next election.
And also, they want to charge £10 per ticket for the event. And the BBC said, basically, we have to comply with our duties as a public service broadcaster, and we could not possibly charge a license fee payers to attend a BBC programme.
No.
So I find that really quite incredible and very revealing about why I thought the GB News debate was so poor. Because now I understand that it was only Conservative Party members in that audience. And that's why there was no challenge and no particular testing of the policies they were suggesting. There was just a push to see which one was going to say the nuttiest right-wing stuff, in all honesty.
I think there was something else happening in the week that was maybe more important than that non-debate.
Oh, go on.
And it happened away from the GB News stage, and that was a meeting of the influential Backbench 1922 committee. So their executive met to discuss what the MP threshold should be for a confidence vote in the new leader should one be raised. Now, listeners will remember that formerly Graham Brady, as chairman, would walk around with the list of signatures that he'd received, letters that he'd received in his
15%,
top pocket.
Wasn't it?
And it was 15%. And it was always a chatter from the May years onwards as to whether a no confidence vote was imminent. And at least once a fortnight, there would be some mutterings, whether it was Johnson, May, Sunak, Truss, whatever. So previously, as you say, 15% of the parliamentary party would submit letters, and those would now go to Bob Blackman. And once that threshold is reached, a vote takes place. And that would mean 18 MPs, because they are now such a reduced parliamentary force, could set in motion the toppling of the leader. They're now discussing whether or not that threshold could rise to a third, which would mean 41 MPs would be required to sign and deliver the next no confidence vote whenever that happens. And I think that 41 number is very, very evocative of the number of MP votes Badenoch and Jenrick both received in the final round.
It was roughly a third each, wasn't it?
Badenoch got 42 and Jenrick got 41. So even raising it to a third doesn't necessarily keep either of them out of a sticky wicket if they don't do things their MPs like.
That's fascinating. That flew completely under the radar. If you hadn't said anything, I wouldn't know that was going on.
Well, there you go, listeners. You get a lot of good stuff on this show you don't get elsewhere. So
it's probably a good thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the other situation where there were constant challenges was ludicrous.
Yeah.
The other thing to say is there was an electoral calculus, hypothetical MRP poll on the Tory leadership. Decent sample, 6,000 something.
What do you mean a hypothetical MRP poll?
They basically ran a poll of how Starmer would fare
against both.
Against Badenoch or Jenrick.
What, at the next election?
Yeah, and found that Jenrick would do slightly better than Badenoch.
Interesting.
And so that got everyone very excited. But to be honest, we're over 4.5 years away from the next election, potentially. I mean, I think an MRP poll on two fictional candidates, I really wouldn't put much stock into it.
It was also based on a sample of about 6,000. And as an MRP aficionado, I would say that is slightly on the low side to do a decent, accurate MRP. I think you need at least a sample of 10K. But who else is a big grandee that's come out to support Badenoch? That would be new editor.
Well, not Johnson. Not Johnson, I can tell you that. He's doing his own thing, freelancing, as always, with an eye to maybe coming back. He's backed Javier Milei, the chainsaw-wielding Argentinian
Of course.
president.
Yeah.
And also, the racist woman that got put in jail for those horrific tweets.
Yes, yeah.
In this week's piece, he says that look at the case of the childminder, 41-year-old Lucy Connolly, who has been jailed for almost 3 years just because of something she put on X.
It wasn't just something.
No. So he's on maneuvers, I think. I think he's going to try and, because he senses Badenoch is the more likely winner, he's going to try and place himself to the right of Badenoch.
Well, all eyes on any by-election seat that comes up then.
The other one, Gove, has...
Yep, I was going to say, in his new role as editor of The Spectator.
Yeah, he's endorsed Badenoch, sort of. He has a lot of fondness for Badenoch, and she is very clever and will make a great leader, but has stopped short of saying, I'm backing her, if that makes sense.
But he does like to endorse a woman of colour, because, segueing into our next section, he has, of course, also said he would vote for Kamala Harris.
I know, which is an extraordinary turnaround. He was very much a Trump fan last time round.
Indeed.
But he says that basically Trump is such a threat to Western cohesion and democracy in America that he would find it unconscionable to vote for him, and he wouldn't even just sit on his hands. He would actually actively vote for Harris.
Yeah.
Quiet. Riot. This is my favorite. He's got the Trump Bible. Wants you to buy the Word of God, Donald Trump edition. His name's going to be on there, embossed, right next to Luke and Mark and Matthew. And by the way, I will give you one guess. You could not make this stuff up. Where these Bibles are made. So, Mr. Tough Guy on China, except when he can make a few bucks, hawking his Trump edition Bibles. Come on, man.
Well, despite 2 devastating hurricanes in recent weeks and concerns about broader conflict in the Middle East, not to mention not 1 but 2 attempts on the life of Trump, record-setting levels of donations for Harris, waves of new voter registration and more, long-term political strategists say they have never ever seen a presidential race this close. And the margins, Alex, they really do look razor thin. Harris is within the margin of error in every battleground state. But Trump is leading on all the issues of the greatest concern. So when you do this sort of straight up voting intention, they're very, very close. But when you say, who do you trust more on issues like the economy and the border, he is leading by very significant margins, and that hasn't yet translated into a significant poll lead. What do I mean by that? Well, Wall Street Journal polling on issues that voters care most about, Trump is leading on the economy by 10 points, 50% to 40. On inflation and cost of living, Trump leads by 10 points again, 50 to 40. On immigration and border security, which is their second top issue, if you like, in terms of voters caring about things, he's leading by 16 points, 52 to 36. And so everyone's scratching their heads about why he isn't further ahead in the Electoral College, and Wall Street Journal suggesting that voters have quite a nuanced view on the economy, and that would probably explain why Harris has a lead on adjacent questions that kind of touch on economic well-being, like healthcare and to a lesser extent housing affordability. But we really could be heading into a situation of 270 to 268 Electoral College victory for Harris, but any one state that gets her to 270 could have a margin of error of just a few thousand votes. So it really is neck and neck. But you've stumbled across a really good point, which is about poll quality, haven't you?
I was reading some stuff that Professor Michael E. Mann, he's quite a distinguished professor of politics at, I think, University of Pennsylvania. I'm pretty sure it's UPenn. Also a member of the National Academy of Science, Royal Society, etc. notable commentator. And he was saying that what a lot of people abroad fail to realize is that there is no polling council like there is here in the UK. Anyone can run a poll on any parameters.
Yeah.
But those polls are rated, and there are many ratings from basically junk to A star. And if you look at A star polls, then Harris is quite a bit further ahead.
Well, that's good.
And I also saw a few people comment on how Rasmussen, which is considered one of the most partisan polling companies, always finds Trump 10 points ahead for some reason. They're dumping a massive amount of polls into the mix at the moment.
Which, of course, changes the average, like the 538
Exactly.
average. Yeah.
It changes the aggregate. So they dumped 5 polls into the aggregate this week. And I was looking at the way 538 rates polls. So the maximum rating is 3 stars.
Yeah.
And then you have a polling score, which is usually a minus number because it shows how close within the margin of error hundreds of polls that they've analyzed against actual results have come. So the gold standard, you have, for instance, Marquette University Law School or Siena College or YouGov, who have a star rating of 3, and then their transparency score, so how they conduct their methodology, is basically between 9 and 10.
Got it.
10 being the maximum. And then you go to Rasmussen, so I'm looking at it now, you find it all the way down. It's got a transparency score of 3.3 out of 10 and isn't even rated.
Yeah.
So they have 0 stars.
Yeah.
And they're the people dumping an enormous amount of polling data into the aggregate at the moment. So
there are polls and there are polls.
There are polls and there are polls. And I've seen a lot of data suggesting that new registrations, especially by women, are at record high.
They are, yeah.
That early voting in swing states is at record high. I mean, the queues in Georgia and
all eyes on early voting. That's going to tell us so much.
It's extraordinary. 15% of the vote has been cast already in some swing states. And I have to say, you look at those queues, and there are a lot of women. There's also youth vote is expected to be very high, and polling tends to disregard that because historical data is that young people eventually don't turn out. Yeah. And some signs that Republican women may be shy Harris voters and just not telling their husbands or might sit on their hands.
Yeah.
And all of this points to Harris being quite underpriced. But historically, shy Trump voters are also a thing.
And riding to Trump's rescue to turn all of this around for him without question, I'm sure, Nigel Farage. He's there again.
I know.
What's he doing there, Alex?
He's out there permanently, I think. He's got an office now out there. He's got staff provided for him by the Bannon outfit, which he has neglected to declare, incidentally.
I hope he's paying US taxes as well as UK taxes.
But do you remember the letter he sent at the start of the election campaign here in the UK when he had decided not to run?
Oh, because he was needed in America.
Yeah, because he said he would be spending all his time in America and that wouldn't be fair to
the people of Clacton.
But then apparently he thought about it and thought, fuck the people of Clacton. I can stand as an MP and then go and do my stuff and earn loads of money in America anyway.
I have to say, I think Donald Trump will be delighted that she's the opponent, because I cannot see, I mean, there is a possibility that at their convention in a few weeks' time, there's a big open fight and somebody else comes through. But I cannot see the Democrat Party getting rid of a black African woman. I just cannot see it.
And so that's it for this week's Quiet Riot Sunday School.
Thank you for listening. I hope you didn't hear too much scratching throughout. I was having to multitask belly rubs with Wrigley, and any time I stopped, he started whining. So apologies if that is being picked up on the mic. Remember, you can follow us on social media, including Blue Sky. at Quiet Riot Pod, or email us on quietriotpod@gmail.com.
Now, in the last 10 days, we did 9 minutes on Swiftgate, which much of the rest of the media devoted its entire time to. And that was on how poorly it reflects on our media. And 7 episodes on tax reform, the state of our railways, class in politics, Gaza, assisted dying, single justice procedures, and the UK-EU deal reset. And all I can say to you is that if you value our work, you need to support our work, because you are our only income. So please go to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and show us your love.
Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We love you all very, very much. And we'll see you again next week.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith, Alex Andreou and Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangita, artwork by Simona Canelu. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
That's amazing. Just as you started. What's he growling at?
I've got the window open. He can probably hear another dog outside somewhere.
Oh, right. Okay. Off you go whenever you want.
I'm Naomi Smith.
And I'm Alex Andreou. Oh, I forgot. I didn't actually put anything in there.
Apart from blah, blah, blah.
Don't do that again.
Improv.